Over the past 100 years, America has pursued an ambitious foreign policy directed by faceless bureaucrats. While some of those departures were justified, American foreign policy is shifting. What began as the attempt of a free people to protect themselves has become rule by those who seek to impose their ideals around the globe. But how did we get here? In Hillsdale College's new free online course, American Foreign Policy, Michael Anton has the answers. Anton is a lecturer in politics at Hillsdale College, who served at the National Security Council during both the George W. Bush and Donald Trump administrations, and he'll be your guide through the history of American foreign policy. Learn about the founders' vision of foreign policy and how progressivism and empire have eroded those principles. To enroll today and secure your spot in this completely free online course, visit hillsdale.edu/new course. NEWCOURSE. That's hillsdale.edu/new course.
Welcome to the Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast, bringing you insight into classical education and its unique emphasis on human virtue and moral character, responsible citizenship, content-rich curricula, and teacher-led classrooms. Now your host, Scot Bertram.
Thanks for listening. The Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast is part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you find your audio. You also can find more information on topics and ideas discussed on this show at our website, k12.hillsdale.edu. Thanks for listening. We're joined today by Sam Clausen. He is an upper school math teacher at Atlanta Classical Academy in Atlanta, Georgia, and also a new master teacher for Hillsdale College K-12 education. Sam, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
Tell us a bit about yourself as we begin and a little about Atlanta Classical Academy.
Well, yeah, my name is Sam Clausen. I teach pre-calculus and calculus at ACA. This is my fourth year down there. I've also started to sneak into our lower grades and teach some kindergarten through third grade math and have been enjoying it.
I see by your tag, you're a Hillsdale alumnus. How did you end up at Hillsdale, and what do you take from your time here?
So I'm a 2017 alum. I ended up here because I peripherally knew of the school. My family knew of it, and I thought maybe I could try a small school, and I didn't really know what a liberal arts or classical education was. But when I came to visit as a prospective student, there was something about people here, and they had something, a way of living that I thought, I want that. I want to be like these people that I've met. And the way I started to put it to people was they knew how to take the serious things very seriously without taking themselves too seriously, and just thought that was incredible. So enrolled here and kind of dove headfirst into the culture and tried to carry that same sort of pursuing those things that really matter, and knowing that we'll never get quite there. We'll never be perfect. And that's okay. And that becoming better and pursuing that truth is a really wonderful thing and a way to live your life.
Was a future in education on your mind while you were here at Hillsdale?
You know, it was in the back of my mind while I was here. It wasn't until my senior year that I took an apprenticeship program here, went down to Hillsdale Academy, sat in on all of Michael Nicola's calculus classes for an entire semester and thought, this is the type of person that I would like to be and what I would like to do with my life. And so at that point, it kind of sealed my fate, I think.
So you were excited about visiting a math class at Hillsdale Academy. What is it about mathematics that appeals to you? Was that also a passion of yours as you entered Hillsdale and moving forward?
Math was absolutely what I was interested in. Coming into college, I wasn't sure how or where I would use it. When I was younger, I think I liked math because I could be right and I was good at it, and it was just another thing I could check off of. I'm good at this. I'm getting a lot of positive reinforcement. And then really in my first couple math classes here, I had a sort of crisis of getting my first non-A's in a math class, and do I still like this thing, even if I'm not perfect at it anymore? And learned to really appreciate math for its own sake, for the way that it orders the mind, and it teaches you to look for order and patterns in everything, not just in those 50 minutes in those four walls, but the way it trains you to see the world is just great. And so I fell in love with it, and the wonder that it can inspire of where are these patterns coming from, or what will they lead to.
Did you take part in the classical school's job fair that is held here on campus each year?
Yes, I did. And so I interviewed around at several different schools, some charter schools, some Christian schools, and ended up really liking what ACA had to offer. I love the fact that we have a student body that's coming from just about every zip code in Atlanta, and that we think that this is something that everyone, no matter what, should be able to have the opportunity to get a great classical education.
Can you tell us a little about what that's like for our Hillsdale students who are looking for jobs, and perhaps now that you're on the other side, how you see it as an employer now, or as someone who might be hiring a Hillsdale student?
It's an intimidating thing when you're walking in there. You're thinking, I need a way to make some money and pay some bills, and I have to leave this place. And there are all sorts of opportunities out there, but it can be a little bit overwhelming. And so I had some good advice of just picking out a few schools and just talk with them, because there are so many good schools. You don't have to talk to every single person, because you'll find somewhere that's a really good place to be. And so that's what ended up happening with me. And now on the other side of it, thinking of what advice I would maybe pass on to a student that was going to that job fair, or anyone who's thinking of getting into one of these classical schools, is to really bring yourself to bear. Excellent teaching is a bit idiosyncratic. We all have those certain quirks and ticks that make us endearing. That's what makes people so interesting. And so bring that to bear, and make sure that you're prepared. Know why you love the subject that you love. Know why you want to spend your time with children and teenagers, because there are times as a teacher you don't want to spend all your time with children and teenagers, but if you have that sort of deep passion for fostering that growth that you get to see in schools, then this is a good place for you.
You're presented with a number of options at the job fair, and as you say, Atlanta Classical speaks to you. Something stands out. What was it about Atlanta Classical that made you focus on them as a potential place to work?
You know, it was a really similar thing to how I ended up at Hillsdale. The community of teachers down there is just incredible. I get to work with, former cancer researchers, award-winning poets, opera stars, and former collegiate basketball players. And it's just incredible how diverse the backgrounds are of these people. And yet they've all come together and have a laser focus on this mission of doing good and learning truth and loving beauty. And so between that and a similar shared vision with parents and with students, there's just a way that people carry themselves down there that I couldn't resist.
You told us when you were considering Hillsdale, you didn't really know about liberal arts education or classical education. Now, 4 years later, you're teaching at a classical school. How did you come to understand what it was, and why did you want to be a part of it?
That's a great question. I think going into college, I had an idea that the liberal arts was sort of a smorgasbord of, hey, learn a little bit about everything and that'll be good. I grew up by Lake Michigan, and so an analogy that kind of worked for me was that I thought the liberal arts was dig a bunch of holes all around the beach, and maybe one of them will get down to the water and maybe not. And at a place where maybe you're going to learn to be specialized and you're going to be really excellent, for me at math, for someone else at writing, for someone else at whatever they're good at. that was like trying to dig a really deep hole and get to the water. But the problem is when you start digging, all that sand starts to cave in. And if you have too narrow of a hole, you can't get down to the water. And so you need this connected, firm base that has enough breadth that then lets you get to that harder, wet sand, and then you can dig deep. And then you can really understand what it is you're studying because you know how to approach it from different angles. And so that was sort of the first understanding of what a liberal arts education really was and what it was like here at Hillsdale. And then this sort of add-on to that I've really come to see as a teacher now is that it's more than simply teaching students how to think. There are a lot of schools, a lot of ways to educate that are really focused on how to think. I think one of the more distinctive things about our network of schools is that we're teaching students what to love as well. And students aren't just these minds or in a vat. They're human beings, and they have affections. They have things that they love. And we want them to love those things that are really worth loving.
Talking with Sam Clausen. He is a upper school mathematics teacher at Atlanta Classical Academy in Atlanta, new master teacher for Hillsdale College K-12 education. Let's talk a bit about mathematics. Where does math fit in this liberal arts education?
I think we get in our math departments a bit of a black sheep reputation that some people will ask, well, is that the part of the school that makes sure these kids get a job? The humanities classes, oh yeah, that's great. We'll learn how to be a good person. And then this is really how you make the money. And I think that really sells us short. I think that math's spot is to teach about the harmony of all of the different disciplines. And it's how you can use things like problem solving and finding patterns to really sort of make a cohesive view of the world. So we talk in our department all the time about the order, beauty, and wonder of mathematics, and that math is really there to teach us to love things that are well ordered, and then we can go out and pursue that order in our lives and get things more aligned with what we know is to be true and what we know is to be good.
So this order of mathematics and this ordered mind that you talked about earlier, are those aspects that students can learn and pick up on that will assist them in other areas of their education?
Yeah, absolutely. Probably the favorite assignment that I give in my pre-calculus class is an essay where I actually challenge students to do exactly that. They have to first look back at the year and think, how did I see order in my math class? They have to look back at the history of math and see what was a discovery that really showed a lot of beauty and order. And then they have to look and they have to pick one of the other classes and say, how have you seen order and how that made something beautiful in one of your other classes? And I've had responses from going into detail about how the Constitution was a great way to order a nation towards the right things, or students breaking down their favorite piece of music and talking about how there were patterns and repetitions and how it just perfectly changes right when you want it to have this great harmony, or when something leaves a dissonance and something else has to come in order to return back to that harmony. You know, students have really blown me away with, once you present this idea to them, the ways that they can see it all throughout the curriculum.
So do you find at all that there are math minds and creative minds among your students? Can anyone in your class become enamored of mathematics?
Yes, absolutely. I think that math is good for all of us. It's a human endeavor. We learn to count, before we learn how to do a whole lot of things in our life, and we learn how to look at the size of things and really do measurement. We know big and small really even before we know the words for big and small. And so being a mathematician is part of being a human. And while there may be some people that are more inclined towards it, and especially more inclined towards maybe more the formalized parts of it, like what I studied, it is good for everyone to see and appreciate and wonder. Just like I'm no world-class musician. I can't really play any instruments, but I can sit and I can listen to something and go, that's a beautiful piece of music. And I think everyone can look at a beautiful piece of math and learn to appreciate that there was a work of genius going into that. And it's just a good thing to behold.
You teach upper school and pre-calculus and calculus, but also have had some experience with some lower school grade levels these past few years too. Are there particular concepts along the way in this journey that are particularly difficult for students to understand and master?
It is always difficult, but always rewarding when students can begin to abstract things. And so we see that at first in, the youngest grades, trying to connect all the different ways I could show the number 4, because they have to learn the symbol for it. They learn that there are, if they put their thumb down, 4 fingers up on their hand, and that's the same as putting 4 linking cubes together, and that all of these things that look very, very different all have something to do with this idea of 4. And if I add one more of whatever these various things that I seem to have 4 of, now I have 5, and it's become a different thing. And that's a level of abstraction. And then you move on, and as they go through the lower school, they start getting blanks in their problems, and they have to do things like 9 times blank is 45. And now it's not enough to have just known the math fact 9 times 5 is 45. They have to have some understanding of what that meant, of how you can remove a piece and then put it back in. And then algebra, variables start coming into place. And that's a whole nother level of abstraction of what happened to the numbers. One of the most common complaints everyone has about math. What happened to the numbers? Why are there all letters now? And then even in calculus classes, we're wrestling with the idea of infinity. And we can't see it. We can't taste it. We can't touch it. We can't smell it. It has to live in our minds. We have to entertain this idea of something going on forever, or being cut up into infinitely many teeny tiny pieces. And how do we develop rules about how to play with infinity? And so being able to abstract from the things we see in Singapore, they talk about the concrete to the pictorial to the abstract is the way we learn math. And it really is that progression for our kindergartners and for our seniors. And it's that one that is so challenging, but is so great to see.
All right. Speaking of tough concepts, your pre-calculus and calculus, and those are classes that I took. But when my kids get there, I doubt I'm going to remember what I need to remember to help them out. So as you get into these advanced stages of mathematics and parents want to be involved in their children's education, how do you recommend they help them if they're unsure about these concepts they learned so long ago?
That is an excellent question, because I think that is so true, that a lot of people feel confident helping with the arithmetic, maybe in the algebra, and then
maybe even geometry.
Yeah. And then they get to me and they go, you're on your own. Once upon a time, I knew this. But I think you can still engage your child with the questions that you ask. I think you can dig a little deeper than what did you learn today? You can ask things like, do you have any guesses at what's coming next? Or, if you had to try to summarize the most important thing of what you learned in 2 minutes this whole year, can you put it down in 2 minutes? That's going to help your child think through, well, there were a whole lot of things, but what was the most important? And we'll get them reviewing it. And it's just a great way to think about those things, or ask, what's the most interesting thing? I even have some parents that will email me and ask me, what are some questions I could ask? And so I send out maybe once a quarter a couple questions that are just, hey, you should ask who wins in a race, Achilles or a turtle, because that's a great classic paradox we start calculus with. And it's fun, even if your child can't fully explain it, to get into these ideas of, well, somehow that turtle's ahead and Achilles tries to catch up, but then the turtle moves ahead again. And it's a great way to get them thinking about what they know.
You're a master teacher now for Hillsdale College K-12, which means you're working with other math teachers at classical schools around the country. You said something earlier that we've touched on a few times during our conversations here. The very best teachers, the memorable teachers, these are the teachers that are very idiosyncratic, and they have these quirks and they have these tics. They're unique. How do you take the best of that and try to replicate or encourage that same sort of behavior in other teachers when it is so perhaps unique to that one person?
Yeah, that's the challenge, isn't it? Is how do you teach those types of things? I think I'd answer that in a couple different ways. The first is you learn through imitation. We learn almost everything through imitation, at least at some degree. And so being able to come to the conference in the summer like this, and I've ended my presentations this summer with little glimpses into what my class looks like. And so you can see the way that I do things and embrace the fact that I'll get lost on tangents of things that I think are interesting or make terrible math jokes, and that's okay, and that's engaging, and allow teachers to reflect on that and see what engaged me. I think it's being explicit with teachers about, think about those things that are interesting about yourself, and come up with 2 ways that you could incorporate that into your class, and be intentional about doing those types of things. And then there are things that are just part of good instruction no matter what. In math, it's about asking questions. It's about finding that perfect balance between, you're not just a show off of, look, I can do math at the board, and then students go, well, yeah, you're the math teacher, of course you can do math. Or the opposite side of it, saying, well, here's a bunch of problems, you'll work them out yourself. It's engaging that Socratic questioning. And so that's a major focus that I have, of teaching teachers how to think through the right questions and how to get students to attack problems from multiple different angles, so that they really own it, and that it's not simply something they've memorized for a test. They can spit back out, and then in 2 months it's gone, and they're trying to cram it back into their brain for final exams. It's something that they've really learned to do, and it's a habit that they've built, because that is what's going to carry with them. And it's the same for the teachers. If you build that habit of asking questions, and you build that foundation, then you can let your own quirks sort of sprout up as they do from that baseline of good, solid teaching.
Sam Clausen is upper school mathematics teacher at Atlanta Classical Academy in Atlanta, and new master teacher for Hillsdale College K-12 education. Sam, thanks so much for joining us here on the Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm Scot Bertram. We invite you to like us on Facebook. Search for Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education. You also can follow us on Instagram at Hillsdale_K-12. Hillsdale_K-12 on Instagram. Thank you for listening to the Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast, part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you find your audio.